If you have watched YouTube at all in the last year or so, you no doubt know what Omaze is. For the few of you who don't, they are an organization that promotes lotteries for all manners of different items and experiences, ranging anywhere from a chance to win a Lamborghini, all the way to an exclusive Star Wars set tour before it hit theaters. This all sounds very cool, especially when it's revealed that all of the proceeds from these lotteries go to support charities. To date, the company has raised over $130 million for charities that do everything from providing scholarships to orphan children to installing solar panels in remote African communities. Surely it would be pretty hard to hate an organization like this, right? Well, you see, despite this chirpy exterior of flashy cars and warm fuzzies, Omaze is hiding a pretty dark secret. So it's time to learn how money works in these raffles because it also reveals a lot about how an alarming amount of charitable organizations conduct themselves in a modern day. So before we go any further, the first thing you need to know about Omaze is that it's a for-profit institution, which means that its primary goal is not to feed the homeless or save the spotted owl, it's to make money. It makes this money by representing organizations that are themselves nonprofits, but they are not one themselves. Now, there's nothing fundamentally wrong with this. If Feeding America held a charity gala in the Hilton Hotel, nobody would have an issue with Hilton Hotels later going on to turn a profit. That's fine. Where Omaze starts to push its luck though is that it really doesn't make any effort to stress this relationship. Just think, when your favorite YouTuber was talking about a car giveaway, they probably spoke a lot about Omaze and the great work that it was doing, but just think, do you remember any of the charities that these raffles were actually meant to fund? If you do, you certainly have a better memory than me, and this is no accident. The company spends millions of dollars on marketing every year, and trust me, if they wanted you to hear about the actual nonprofits, you would have heard about the actual nonprofits. The company would instead like you to conflate Omaze with saving the children more so than running lotteries to make fat stacks. And trust me, they do make fat stacks. Gambling is bad. It's a vice. And like most vices, it's heavily regulated. Gambling of any kind is illegal in most states in the USA, and the same goes for a healthy selection of countries around the world. So how is it that this for-profit company is able to run what is essentially a for-profit casino? Well, again, they use this guise of charity work to get through this on a technicality. You see, technically it is these charities running these lotteries. Omaze is simply marketing them, and that is allowed. Of course, when these laws were written, most lawmakers were expecting that this exemption would be used for gift basket charities at bowling clubs, rather than high-valued international lotteries, but c'est la vie, I suppose. It's telling that the origin story of the company is a tale of how the two founders, Matthew Polson and Ryan Cummings, went to every law professor at their respective universities until they found one that agreed that their business plan was technically legal. Now, despite the entire organization jumping through loopholes like an Olympic gymnast, you might be thinking, who cares? Most people watching these ads would be forgiven for thinking that there was any charity involved at all. Some people just really love the idea of one day owning a Lamborghini, and just the thrill of having a chance is worth the bet. And sure, look, gambling is bad, but it's also fun. And if you can somehow convince yourself that this is all for a good cause along the way, all the better, right? Well, the issue here is that these Omaze lotteries are just a really bad bet. To demonstrate this, we have to look at the risk to reward of these lotteries, which is also a really good excuse to properly understand how this business model works under the hood. So if you put $1 down on one of these lotteries, how much should you expect to get back? It is still gambling after all, so it will be less than the dollar that you put in. That's fair enough. Well, blackjack, for example, will normally return you about 96% of the money that you put into it, assuming that you play perfectly and play an indefinite amount of hands. Your regular state lottery normally has a payout of about 90% on average, again, assuming that you play this indefinitely. And at the bottom of the barrel, you have things like scratch-off lotteries, which normally pay out about 85% of what you put into them. A fact that has been beautifully visualized a few times by MrBeast on his channel. I wonder if he made those videos just for the statistic nerds like me. Now, it must be recognized that scratch-off lotteries are normally seen as the worst type of gambling, considering their absolutely f***ing awful expected return. But Omaze, on the other hand, well, that has an expected payout of only 70 cents for every dollar that is put in. We know this because they break it down on their website. For every $10 you contribute, $7 typically goes towards sourcing and shipping the prize and paying for credit card fees and taxes and marketing. So this statistic could actually, and likely will be, a lot worse. Now, for the sake of this demonstration, we have ignored their experiences, because it really is hard to say how much a person values a dinner party with George Clooney in Lake Como. But for what it's worth, the payout value is actually even worse for these types of lotteries. Now, you gotta ask, well, if $7 out of every 10 I put into the scheme is used for actually sourcing the prize and marketing the lottery, where is everything else going? Well, $1.50 goes to Omaze. That is how they make their profits. Because remember, that $1.50 is paid after everything else has been covered, including sponsor dollars they will pay to your favorite YouTubers, so their margins are pretty fat on this.
Let's not talk about my margins, by the way. Being nice and fat, that's a nice shirt. Do they make it from End?
The remaining $1.50 goes to the charity itself. So if you were thinking that this was for a good cause, just remember that at best, only 15% of what you contribute is actually going to good use. And if you really didn't care about the charity aspect and just wanted a chance to win a cool car, well, as we have seen, statistically, your money would be better spent elsewhere. So, all this begs the question, why would charities agree to participate in this kind of scheme? It looks to only be operating to build up a massive online for-profit casino, with only a sliver of the money going to them. So, why not just ask for donations the good old-fashioned way? You know, guilting people with TV ads. Surely, the potential hit to the charity's reputation couldn't be worth this, right? Well, the answer to this question is revealed once again by looking at Omaze's website. Here we will find two possible answers to this little conundrum. The marketing approved answer and the correct answer. The marketing approved answer is that Omaze can leverage their branding power to raise more money than these charities ever could. The company argues that 15% of $1 million is better than 90% of $50,000, which is likely what these nonprofits would raise through more traditional methods. And sure, Omaze is going to take a cut along the way, but isn't that only fair since it simply gives these charities more money to do good with? Well, this is where we get to the correct answer. While you were looking through this website, you may have noticed that you don't really recognize any of these charities. Part of the reason that these charities would find it so difficult to raise money without the use of thinly veiled online casinos is that they are just not that substantial. Now, I'm going to sound like the Grinch for saying this, but as far as charities go, that is often a really bad sign. Now, I'm not going to say that every charity on the website is like this, and certainly there are hundreds of charities out there that are like this that are not on Omaze. What I mean by like this is being less interested in doing and funding worthy causes and more interested in making their founders wealthy and influential. But this doesn't make sense. How can charities make people wealthy? It says right there in the title, not for profit. That means no profit, right? Well, no. Not for profit is a bit of a misnomer. All it means is that the profits can't be distributed to a private individual. But there are other ways that these not-for-profits line the pockets of its founders. It's very easy for charity founders to appoint themselves or a close association to a position of CEO in the organization and draw a nice fat salary as compensation. On top of that, they can pay lots of money to run fancy events to entertain potential donors, all on the organization's budget. If anything, this is encouraged because salaries and marketing are all expenses, and other than making sure there's enough money to run the organization next year, there really is no incentive to make a profit. Of course, these charities do still need to put some money towards what they say they will, but in many cases, this can be less than 10% of what the organization brings in, which means the other 90% can be used for all this other stuff. Now, the one problem is that if this becomes public knowledge, people are much less likely to donate to your charity, which means you will have no income to pay for your lavish salary and boozy golf days. This simply won't do, which is where Omaze comes in again. You see, the average person giving money to Omaze doesn't really do much research on the charities they are representing. Whereas a wealthy donor might have their lawyer look over the financial statements and perhaps even introduce pledging requirements before writing $1 million check, the average person on the Omaze website makes their charitable donation decisions based on whether or not they look better driving a Lamborghini or a Ferrari. At the end of the day, they are still happy the money is going to charity. How much? Well, as we have seen, it's only going to be a fraction of a fraction. So should YouTubers and people like George Clooney stop promoting this service? It's really hard to say. On one hand, the company itself is downright slimy, but I do have to agree with the major points that they made, which is that more money for good causes is always a worthwhile thing. It's likely that this money would not be raised without these questionable tactics, and even if only 15% is going to a charity which will only use 10% of that money to put towards charity work, well, that's still 1.5% of millions of dollars doing some good. So no, this is not an attack on George Clooney. I mean, how could I ever stay mad at him? And it's not an attack on the YouTubers taking sponsorship deals either. If anything, this is an attack on you. The people that keep making this scheme possible by giving it money. So now that you've learned how this money works, you'll know that if you want to gamble, go to Vegas. If you want to give money to charity, then give money to charity. Don't half-ass both and convince yourself that you are going to be a Lambo driving saint, because you're not going to be either. Now, if you want to see me throw down with some much larger and more successful YouTubers, then go watch my video on why personal finance influences like Graham Stephan might be doing more harm than good to their impressionable audience. In the meantime, please consider liking and subscribing to keep on learning how money works.